We have a great program this afternoon, and I'm really excited to share it with you and to have you participating. Hopefully you've all brought your virtual pencils with you because we are hoping to make this an interactive discussion and really share some great tips and ideas that you'll be able to take back with you and put into use as early as tomorrow. So what we'll have on tap in terms of our agenda for the day, we'll do some quick introductions, and if you would share with us what is your student's biggest math challenge? What are some of the issues that you're facing in your classroom? Just to kind of set the stage for our discussion today. Then we'll dive into the content. As I mentioned, we're very fortunate to have Kathleen McNally from SREB joining us today. She's familiar to many of you who have attended the TAP math workshops, and she also was kind enough to present on one of our earlier math CTE math webinars. So she has some great strategies and information to share with us today. We'll start out thinking about ways to use literacy strategies in support of math understanding, taking some of those ideas or strategies that you may have learned in training such as Max Teaching or other programs and applying those in a math context. Then we'll talk about multiple representations of data. So getting students to think visually about data and translating information that they maybe have in a chart into, say, a graph or into words, really using that data and math ideas. Then we'll talk about some problem-solving strategies. How do you help a student who just doesn't even know where to start on a word problem? Or what are some techniques that you can help them learn to feel more confident with their math work? And then finally, we'll talk about some of the Common Core math practices and and ways that you can enhance your lessons and really take those math lessons to the next level. So before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. If you are sharing a connection with a colleague, if you've logged on together, that's fantastic. We just ask that you enter your names into the question box so we can keep track of attendance. And certainly if you have questions or comments as we go, please feel free to enter those as well into the question box or to raise your hand. We'll take a couple breaks during the program to ask questions, but if something comes to mind, we'll be monitoring the questions coming in as well and interrupt or take pauses as we need to. So with that, why don't we just go a quick roundtable, let everyone say hi, and if you want to share what is your student's biggest math challenge, please feel welcome to do so. So I'll just go down the list. Looks like everyone is showing up in alphabetical order, and I will go ahead and start with Alan Fry. Good afternoon, Alan. Thanks for joining us. If you're able to, Alan, if you just want to say hi, and if you have any comments on your student's biggest math challenge. Okay, maybe we'll come back to Alan. He might not have audio. Oh, he doesn't have a microphone. Okay, well, thank you for joining us. Andy Watt, good afternoon. Do you have audio today? Microphone?
Is it working?
Oh, yes. Okay. Great. Refresh our memory on your school and...
Jeff Tech in Rennesville. I hate to say, but my students' biggest math problems is basic math, converting fractions to decimals and adding fractions, just general rulers and that. It's not the big time stuff that they're missing out on. They've missed some basics along the way.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. And I expect that's not the only. You're not the only one who probably is going to say that today. All right. Let's see. Oh, it said Alan has typed in that his students also have basic math problems as well. How about Ben? Good afternoon.
Hi, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, thanks for joining us.
Okay, well, it's nice to be on board again. Just want to, kudos to you last time. That was a great webinar that you had going on last time.
Thank
And
you.
hopefully you'll continue to do that. I mean, I'm just running into the same basic problems a lot of other, technical teachers there. I mean, the basic math is the big problem. Division, multiplications, where to put the decimal point, conversions, I guess you can consider most of that some basic math problems there.
Sure. Okay, and remind us, Ben, which school you're from?
Monroe Career and Technical Institute.
Great. Thank you. Glad to have you with us today.
Thank you.
How about Bobby Bard? Good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Bobby Bard, Franklin County Career and Tech, Kingsburg, PA. I agree with everybody else what was saying. It's the basic math skills. And a lot of that issue is because a lot of those skills the students haven't revisited, throughout their school career. They're all skills that they would have learned in the elementary school. And, a lot of them, it's been 6, 7, 8 years since they've seen those or even had to use those skills.
Right, right. Okay. Thank you for saying that. Your microphone was a little bit muffled, but I think we were able to get the gist of what you were saying, that the basic skills, and often the students are coming to your classroom without having mastered that. So certainly a challenge that many CTE instructors are facing. Let's go to Dave Mergis. Did I say your name correctly?
Yes.
Hi, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, York County School of Technology. The fundamentals are key player, and also just basic things like the understanding of numbers. For instance, calculating the labor rate. Say it's $80 an hour. It takes 2 hours. Mathematical multiplication issue. Kids will come up with $1,600 for the answer and not figure, well, something seems wrong here.
Mm-hmm.
Just say, oh, well, let's run with it. So it's just understanding that maybe looking at numbers by just that, something's wrong.
That's a good point. Just kind of estimating and thinking, what's the ballpark figure that you should probably come up with as your answer to that question. That's good. Great. Well, thanks for sharing that, and thanks for joining us. Let's see. David Thistlethwaite, looks like you maybe are calling in, but I'm not able to unmute your unmute your phone. What you'll need to do there, if you want to be able to speak, is to get the audio pin, and this is for everyone who has called in via phone. On your control panel on the right side, under audio, there is a pin number that you need to enter that will enable you to unmute your phone. Let's just continue on then. Jeff Schmel, good afternoon.
Hello.
Hi, go ahead, please.
Yes, in fact, I just did a lesson this morning with the students on Ohm's Law. And what I found is working with the math coach, she helps us show them the math way of doing it as opposed to the auto tech way of doing it. And that really seems to help. I think they can really understand it then. So I think it's great when you have a math coach or a math teacher to help you and actually co-teach.
Sure, and we're going to talk about that a bit today, bridging that that gap between sort of the CTE vocabulary and the math, the sort of mathematical academic side of things. So, thank you for raising that. That's a great point. Okay, just continuing down the list. Jim, good afternoon.
Hello.
Hi. Remind us which school you're from and if you have any thoughts to share on students' biggest math challenge.
Well, I'm from Susquehanna County Career and Technology Center. We're up near the New York border here. Now, my challenges, again, are basically from what I've heard from a lot of these guys, the same stuff. It's just such basic lapses in their judgment on math, period. You know, we try to do a certain amount of math with them just as a practice thing. We use as bell work to work on their basic math skills. But, you know, their basic math skills are very lacking, and they don't seem to be able to look at an answer and say, oh, that doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm. Right. Great. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm happy to have you online today. Let's go on to Kathy Houghton. Kathy, are you microphone enabled today? Thanks for joining us.
Yes, I am.
Great.
I am. Can you hear me okay? Okay.
Yes, please. Go ahead. Tell us from your perspective.
Okay. This is Kathy Houghton, math coach from the Technical College High School, Penn Oxbridge campus. From my perspective, since I'm a math coach, I just see different things for students, and I think probably the biggest one is just a math phobia to begin with. They just hear that they're going to be doing math and they just shut down. They don't want to do any work that's involved or feel that they can't. So I think a little bit of their attitude is something that we need to overcome before they even start some problems.
Mm-hmm. Great point. Yes, thank you for sharing that. It's a very important point. And thanks for joining us. Do you have anyone there with you today, or are you?
Not right now. I might have someone come down later. If I do, I'll let you know when they join us.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you. Let's see. Looks like we have Mary Rodman joining us today. Mary, thanks for signing on. Would you like to share any thoughts from your perspective? Maybe her phone microphone isn't. Mary, if you're speaking, we're not hearing you, so perhaps your microphone is muted. But we're glad to have you on board. How about Mike? Let's give you a quick chance to say hi.
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
Mike Bernstein, Lehigh Career and Technical Institute. Basic math skills, huge problem, especially when it comes to fractions into decimals and decimals into fractions. Even when it comes to reading a basic ruler to measure wheelbase of a car.
Sure. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Glad to have you on board. And let's see, Paul, did you have anything you would like to add? Okay, looks like he might have stepped away for a moment. Let's go on to Pete Holland. Pete, good afternoon. Okay, I know we have a couple of folks who have typed in messages that their audio is not working today, so perhaps Pete is one of them. And I see we have Richard Ross online as well, and his he doesn't have microphone capability. Okay, and neither does Pete. Okay, well, gentlemen, thank you for joining us, and please, if you have any questions or comments as we go ahead and type those into the question box. And we also have Mr. Morocco online as well. And did you care to add anything, or would you rather listen in today, Sam?
Sure. How you doing, Jennifer?
Hi. Good. Thanks for calling in.
Yep. I agree with comments that everybody made about their struggles with their students in math, the basics, and I did like the comment that was made about just the math phobia. But I am lucky. I'm kind of in the same boat as Jeff Schmale is. We have a good math coach, and I think the link between her ability with math and my ability with the students in automotive, I know where they don't see what she's trying to say, and I think we bridge that gap better by relating to the students better.
Right, and having both of you there, I imagine, is very helpful as well, and also the relationships that you're both building with the students. So thank you for sharing that, and thanks for calling in. Appreciate it. So, okay, great. Well, I'm glad everyone, seems like most folks' microphones are working, or phones, so that's great to hear. So we won't take up any more time with that aspect, and we'll go ahead and dive right into our program then. I'm gonna run the slides for Kathleen, and she'll be leading our presentation today. But again, if you have questions or thoughts as we go, please raise your hand or enter that into the question box. We'll be monitoring those. as we go. In fact, why don't we just quickly do a show of hands to see how many folks on the call have attended one of the TAP math workshops at some point over the last couple years. Click on the raise your hand, that hand icon. Just take a quick look here to see Kathy Houghton, Jeff Schmel. Okay, looks like we have just a couple folks, Kathleen, who have had the wonderful opportunity to sit in on one of your sessions in person. So fortunately for them, we have you online with us today, and they'll get a quick overview of some of the great information and materials that you've shared with folks at the workshops. It looks like Jim has as well. So why don't I go ahead and turn over the microphone to you, and just let me know when you'd like me to advance the slides.
Okay, thank you so much. And Jennifer, this is a neat group. I'm very excited.
Yes.
Wow. It's like a power team of automotive across the state, so that's very, very exciting. I don't think that I have an opportunity to see hands raised and whatnot, so if you could help me navigate that, I would love it. At any point in time when folks have something to add or question or whatever, would love that. Okay, so you just stop me.
We will. Matt and I will
okay.
ring a fire drill bell or something. So.
Okay, yeah. It's great. It's such an interesting way of conducting business when you can't see folks, but I do know some of these folks, and so I see their faces, and it's great to kind of be with you, at least in the virtual world. So I just wanted to make a mention of the national research that was done several years ago, and Pennsylvania was very involved, and there was an automotive group that was involved, because we had mentioned that in our first go-round, and I think that there are a couple big implications that came out of this. And when folks were introducing themselves and talking about what their students struggle with, and those basics and the gaps, and that whole idea of like not even making sense of things, like they don't have that estimation quality, the math phobia, all of that is so dripping with reality. It is so true. And I think it's important for us to keep in mind these 7 elements and what came out of this study. Whether or not you sign on to writing lessons in a very tight way and having these things reflected, I think there's a couple pieces of value. And so the next slide, I think I have those summarized, Jennifer, and those are this. One of the big understandings and the big learnings that came out of that was this idea that you brought up, some of you folks brought up in your introduction, about really making sure that we have an opportunity to bridge language and terminology. And so there's lots and lots of instances that you folks already know, and it does really help students to help make the transfer if they hear what they're doing, when they're doing piston displacement, what that is like, what we talk about, how we talk about that mathematically, which is not the same necessarily as when you're in the world of automotive. And so that's a very big understanding. The second is to actually help see the difference between the contextual and the traditional, and I thought that was great. I think Jeff may have mentioned that. They're saying, look, I'm lucky to have this person, or Jim, and saying, when we co-teach, I know Sam has this opportunity to see, so students kind of get to see the math that's involved, and they're seeing it together. They see it one way, they see it in context, and they see it traditionally, and it really helps them make the connection. Because we can't assume that students carry these types of things from their math classes. It's weird, but it's true. And then lastly, this idea of the naturally embedded mathematics. It's really a great opportunity, especially now with the Common Core state standards and the goals of those, which are very much about application and kind of new, fresh problem-solving sort of skill sets, and how important it would be to tap the world of automotive for that. So those are big 3 implications, and I just wanted to mention that before we get into the nuts and bolts of what we're doing today. Thank you, Jennifer. So we have a couple key ideas to present and to really get your thoughts and examples and suggestions on these in terms of all of these sort of mini tools for a toolbox that we're going to talk about today really do support this idea of the 7 elements of making the connections, helping students see the value in the context, and all that good stuff. And we wanted to start with the idea of if you're in a TAP a center that's involved in the TAP initiative. Most likely, you have been involved in literacy strategies or literacy training, max teaching, and so it really does make sense to tap those things and see how they apply mathematically. So we have a couple ideas, and we'd love to pose a question first, I think. Oops, no, sorry. Well, here's our goal for that. Our goal for that is, as I said, in the National Research Center, it's this bridging the gap. So like on one side, we had showed this last time, the idea of resurface drum, cut value, wear surface. And you folks have really cool language, if I may say so, and how you talk about things, and it's real, you know, it makes sense. And then on the mathematics side, you know, the same scenario, the same problem that students may work on in a math class, they may hear coefficient, inside diameter, inequality, and so it would be a little different. And so we're trying to say, let's bridge that gap. Thank you.
Okay, this is Jennifer. I'm sorry, I got trigger happy on my slides there. The question that we were curious to poll folks on was, please raise your hand, click on the hand icon if you've received any type of training in literacy strategies, be it max teaching or some of the other Cornell notes or any type of professional development or in-service training on that. Just wondering how many folks are familiar. It looks like about half the group, Kathleen, or maybe a little bit more, have had some exposure to these. So a good foundation.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Shall I go to the next slide?
Yes, please.
Great.
So this idea of bridging the world, the literal world of literacy, world of automotive, and literacy world of mathematics, has to sort of it does, and it uncovers these different technical vocabularies and what they mean. And some of them have math meaning, like volume is really truly brought to life in the world of automotive instead of just sort of theoretically in mathematics. And so it will be an interesting exercise to think about. So all the tools we're going to look at in the next few slides, we really want to encourage you to think about how might this apply to lift or stroke or overlap, this kind of thing. So Jennifer? So here's our question. We want to start and sort of pick your brains and see where you go with this and then show you a couple of things. Do you want to read that, Jennifer? You want me to?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So we had asked folks to share examples and vocabulary and whatnot in preparation for today's session. And we did have a couple instructors who mentioned that their students are using composition books or notebooks in class for doing their math assignments as well as writing. And so what we were curious to hear from you all is, do you have any ideas, or do you currently have a way to combine the math work that the students are doing with a writing exercise? So just going to leave that very open-ended and see if there are any ideas or thoughts on that. And I think I'll start. Andy Watt had his hand raised, and I just wanted to check in with him. Andy, did you have a question or a comment on one of the earlier slides? Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. That might have just been from our earlier question. Okay. Anyone have any examples or comments? Let's see. It looks like Sam has entered into the question box. He says he creates both of those on worksheets. Totally agree with combining them. Okay. Let's see. Looks like we have another hand up. Lisa Hughes, math coach from Reading-Muhlenberg, has joined us. Good afternoon, Lisa. Did you want to expand on that or add anything?
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
Actually, what I was going to do was type it in then. I didn't realize you were typing. Sorry. One thing I've tended to do with Cornell Notes is I've done a Cornell Notes where they have math. Sorry about that. My phone's ringing. Where you have math problems on the one side and you go through a step-by-step so you can solve it on both sides as far as looking at it and writing about it. So you could have the writing on one side, the explanation, and the actual math problem on the other side, and it works real well to keep students focused as far as where they're headed.
Great, thank you. That's a creative use of that structure. That's really good. Anyone else have something that they'd like to add or share? Okay. Well, Kathleen has some great ideas for us, so we'll turn the microphone back over to her, and perhaps some of these ideas will trigger some thinking or some additional thoughts among our participants today.
Great, thank you so much. And I'll tell you, Jennifer, I have to say it's really sweet of you to say these are super ideas, because they're not mine. I just, kind of hunt and peck, and I pull from the folks that are on this webinar. So, but I'll tell you, if you're having a bummer day, it's great to join you. I feel really great, so thanks. So the first strategy, this idea of journaling can be very powerful, and I've seen some really creative uses of this out in the field. And I just wanted on the screen our research, SREB, the 6 big areas of understandings of literacy that all of our students need to be able to do. They need to be able to recognize terminology, infer, categorize, summarize, etc. We found that journaling can be a great way to do that. And I'm just curious, because I think that there's a lot of technical teachers, CTE teachers, that are using journaling in maybe a non-traditional sort of way. It's not exactly like, like you think of a young lady in 7th grade, a young teenager kind of working through their angst, sitting there journaling their thoughts. I mean, that is one way of journaling, but that's not the only way. So I wanted to see if we could pull up that example that came from Parkway West, I think. It was really neat. Wanted to just show that and see what folks thought about that.
Sure. Bear with me, please, as I locate that.
Sure. And I think I'll keep talking if I may do that, there it is that they created this, Parkway West created this structure of this journal, and the teachers can develop and change up their prompts. And so the beginning kind of lays out what they're looking for from students, and then as you scroll down, you'll see that the journal has different entries. So some of them are just kind of getting them going, like, this one, how about becoming a well-known celebrity for a day? But then there's other ones that can be very specific to the automotive world or whatever their discipline is. And then they also build in, if you keep going, they build in employability skills questions, and then they may have some vocabulary connections. And so this one is a fairly structured journaling experience that I've seen, and I think that's a really interesting one as well. Thank you so much for showing that.
Sure, and
I know they're happy to share. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I was just going to say that we will post this on the SAS community site, so folks can take a closer look at it and perhaps adapt it to their situation. Great, thank you. So this idea of journaling kind of goes different ways, and some of you have shared with me that teachers are journaling and students are journaling, but not necessarily in writing. They're journaling their math thinking and some of their computation, which is great. That's another twist on that. Thank you. So the next slide then invites us to consider another idea. And if we are going to ask students to write in journals and support math understanding, this is another way to do it. And some of you might be familiar with this nomenclature if you're currently involved in TAP work. LDC stands for Literacy Design Collaborative, and it's a national effort to look at strengthening and preparing students through the literacy goals of the Common Core. And it's built around trying to connect reading assignments and writing and sort of ratcheting up. And so this slide shows an example of a writing prompt. And on the left side, it's suggesting that that is a task from the LDC Collaborative, and I'll let you read that. And then on the right is a traditional prompt. And perhaps, Jennifer, we can ask folks to read that and see if they think, or who thinks that there's, is one more rigorous than the other? Is there benefit to one? I'm just curious of their thinking. We'll give everyone a chance to take a look at that, and if you have a thought or a comment, please raise your hand or type that into the question box. We're interested to hear from you. Looks like we have a hand raised. Ben, I'll go ahead and unmute your microphone. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think this is very beneficial. I mean, I feel like I shouldn't even have to raise my hand on this. This is a good example on both sides, on the writing task and the writing prompt. It just seems to take it another step further. I think it's very, very useful, very beneficial.
Thank you. Any other responses or questions about how you might do this in your own classroom? Taking a quick look and see. Let's see. Looks like we have another hand raised. Bobby Bard, I'll unmute you. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Jennifer. Basically, what I do with a lot of my sections,
I'm sorry, Bobby. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Your microphone is going. It's kind of fading in and out a little bit.
Is that a little better?
That is. Go ahead, please.
Okay, we'll try it there. As far as lots of times when I finish different sections of my textbook, instead of giving a traditional style test, you know, true or false, choice and all, one of the things that I've done and I do quite frequently, and it seems to work well for the students, is I just basically tell them in paragraph form, I need you to write down 5 things that you learned from this section. And I'm very amazed at when they're able to put things in their own words and how well they did and what they did take from that section.
Okay. Yeah, so cut out a little bit there, but what I believe I heard you say was that you'll often have students write down what are five takeaways or 5 things that you've learned from reading this. Is it the section of the textbook that you use?
That's correct.
Okay. And how do you find their responses are? Do you get complex, complete sentences, or are they jotting it down in just in phrases? Or are they copying it from the book?
No, this is definitely a closed book, summary.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that we do start at the beginning of the semester. It seems with almost all of our students is just reviewing, what does a sentence consist of, what does a paragraph consist of, so that they have an understanding of my expectations of what I want them to write.
Sure. Setting those expectations early on is good. Okay, thank you for sharing that. Looks like Lisa Hughes has says that these are great to have students learn to write letters in a business format. It's what they need to do out in business and industry. And thank you for suggesting that, Lisa. That was actually one of my thoughts back to our earlier question of how to combine math and literacy, was that, I thought of the situations where you're having to respond to a customer or work with a vendor and put those explanations in writing, and that seems like a great opportunity to do that. Anything else before we move on? Okay, I don't see any additional hands raised. Kathleen, at this point?
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate it, and it's great to hear. I appreciate Ben saying, yeah, it takes it one step further, and Bobby's comment about how he connects the reading and the writing responses. Lisa's suggestion is very creative and right on top. And I wanted to just make one quick note of this, is that you may say, well, this is a webinar about math and CTE, and it is. And so I want to bring your attention to, on the left side, the last sentence, not underlined, it says, be sure to support your position with evidence from the text. And I think if the students are asked to develop, if they have to justify, that can include their math thinking. That's what we want. We want them to see the value of using mathematical thinking as a way to say, that's why I made this decision, or that's why I'm offering you the work at this price. Those, for them to get the idea across that that's a very powerful support of how they communicate their effectiveness is by also including their math thinking. That's a great thing. So thank you so much. So our next example on the next slide, thank you, and we will walk through these very quickly. Just for some levity, we have a collection of young children describing the instructions of how you cook a turkey. So I just wanted to see, there's 2 slides real quick. I wanted to give you a moment to soak those in. Okay. Okay, well, thank you for humoring me about that and for your patience, but I think, as Zach says, it's ready when the bones are sticking out of its legs. I mean, it's just, sometimes you have to go to the source of a 5 or 6-year-old to get this, get down to reality. But this is an example of, I think, a great intersection for leveraging math understanding is by challenging students in the automotive world to have to explain and draw out directions for things. I think there's so much richness in process in the automotive world in terms of how you do things. And I was curious, maybe folks have some suggestions on what they've done around that. So instead of cooking a turkey, it would be neat to hear, is there an opportunity that you've taken to challenge students to have to either write a set of directions or write out a process or write out how they troubleshooted something in order to explain it to somebody else? Jennifer, can we see if anybody has thoughts about that, examples?
Sure. Are there any, folks, are there any processes or situations that occur in your curriculum where you have either done something like this or could potentially do an exercise to ask your students to write out the steps in a process? Ben has his hand raised. Go ahead, please.
I've done it in automotive related, and I've done it just in a general way. And it was something just as simple as making like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And they had to write it out, every detail of the instructions to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And then I would do the demonstrating as they were actually reading what their notes were on how to do this. And it was an eye-opener, just to make something as simple as that, how wrong it could go. And then we've done it on the different repair procedures on certain tasks on a vehicle. Again, my emphasis again is detail. When you're doing a diagnostic troubleshooting of a certain component using critical thinking skills and you're doing problem solving, it's so critical not to miss a step. And that's what I was trying to show the students, how important detail is. Thank you.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. That's a great example. I've heard that, the peanut butter sandwich example, and it's a great way to start and probably a lot of fun for the students. Jim entered a comment that he has students do flow charts on some tasks for certain situations, and Sam shared that he does process writing all day. And he had also shared some great keywords that he uses for writing exercises. For example, describe, compare, list, and analyze. So some great words to prompt students to do that writing. I thought we saw one other hand raised. Did anyone else have anything that they wanted to share or suggest related to this idea? Looks like, oops, sorry folks, I'm clicking around here. Dave Merges. Go ahead, please. Did you have a thought?
Yes, and I do something similar to the peanut butter and jelly sandwich, except I get a random student from another class to come in, and in my class has to coach that student how to draw an item, like for instance a wheel cylinder. And they have to describe to the student who doesn't know that component just what to draw. And I use colored dry erase markers and that kind of thing, and they course, have to get everything from the bleeder screw and the flex nut to the spring and the cups and the pistons and the boots and stuff. So, there's always a couple that want to take the show and run with it. And then the other ones that normally wouldn't participate, they're at least watching for the most part and learning, these are the inner parts. So I do that off and on with different components just so kids can learn the inside for themselves.
Fun. That sounds fun. I was on a call with some math coaches recently, and I think that they described having students do something similar with them as a way to sort of build that relationship and comfort level with having them in the room. So that's another take on that. Let's see. How about one more comment? It looks like Mike has his hand raised. Mike, did you want to add something?
Oh, yeah. I have kind of a roundtable thing in the morning on Mondays after the weekend if anything happened interesting, automotive related over the weekend. And a lot of times they'll say, yeah, I seen a tire fall off a car, or else I was working on this and that, helping friends or whatever. And then I'll say, well, describe the process. What could they have done differently, or were you being the descriptor of telling someone who is not automotive related how to, change brakes or do something like that. Also, when we purchase a new piece of equipment, for example, like a tire changer or something like that, I'll have the kids, prior to showing the operation of the video, or like a brake rotor machine, have them write down what steps they think, and then I'll use their process of going through it, and then they'll be saying, Mr. B, you're wrong. What I find out it makes them do is pay attention to detail, and I find them that they actually focus a little more when they start doing reading, of a procedure.
Right. Good example. And I like that, bringing in something from their own world, a real life application. So that's a really interesting way to get them involved. Thank you for sharing. Okay, let's take a quick look here. Okay, Kathleen, I think we're ready to continue on. Shall I go to the next slide?
Yep, sounds good. Thank you.
Sure.
Wonderful ideas. Now this comes to us from some of our colleagues right online with us. And this is a super example, very rich, very exciting. I had an opportunity to actually see, observe in the classroom, to see this great collaborative opportunity for kind of the clash between math and automotive at Reading-Muhlenberg. And this idea of almost having students sort of prove or feel this idea of how engine displacement is synonymous with the volume, calculating the volume of a cylinder. And there was one piece in particular I wanted to show off on the next slide, and I certainly want to turn it over if the folks from Reading-Muhlenberg would like to describe that. If you can click to the next one there. Okay, from a literacy standpoint, they had these side-by-side diagrams to show the relationship of bore and stroke to the volume of the cylinder in terms of the volume measures. And so the students had these visuals to label, and they could see, literally see, side by side the comparison. And I thought it was terrific in terms of literacy, because they popped in the, in the boxes, they popped in the vocabulary, and they were like, okay. Like, it just smacks you right in the face. And I just thought, was great. So I don't know if the folks want to comment on that, but it was a really rich, the whole thing was rich.
I would like Sam to comment on it. What's really neat, I'll tell you what, as a math coach, the only way this gets done is if my teachers call and ask me for help. I mean, I go in too, but if they don't really want my help, it's a lot more difficult. And I want Sam to talk about this more, because without Sam asking and coming and saying, hey, the students asked me about this, this really wouldn't have happened. So, Sam, if you can get on, that would be great.
Yeah, sure, I'm here. Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, this was a good one. I think might have even been the best collaboration that Lisa and I had, and was kind of neat. Just the other day, we were talking a little little bit, and we already got two or three other things planned with this kind of comparison and simplicity. And on this one here with the cylinder displacement, it started as some more or less some bookwork in the classroom. We do our lessons, but then I have some stuff that they naturally have to do a little bit on their own, and they got to some problems in a workbook about the volume of a cylinder, and it was with a group of kids that I felt like I could let go a little bit to see if they could get somewhere on their own, and some did, some needed help, but some of the higher level thinking students, particularly one, was, well, why couldn't I just use the formula for a volume of a cylinder? And I really didn't have an answer. I said I didn't know, and I was able then to go to Lisa and ask her to, actually just ask her if she has some time at the end of the one day to come down, and we were sitting there together. She was using a calculator, and I was just Googling stuff, and came across a fraction. It was pi over 4, and the teachers out there might know the formula for volume of a cylinder. I think it's 0.785 times this and times that and times the number of cylinders, and what's the height and the diameter of the circle. But the formula that the automotive world uses is different than the volume of a cylinder, but we were able to we figured out, reverse engineered it, I guess, and then create this exercise, which went into a nice PowerPoint that I had the kids use. We did another one with them. It was a return to it. Well, actually, no, really it was a beginning of it, because that day ended, and it wasn't really me going over it. This was the first time that we formally discussed it. So, yeah, I had now the comparison between what the high-level student was asking, and I know there was kids that were having trouble with it, never got to that question on their own, but it allowed many levels of students to understand the volume of a cylinder and how to figure out the volume or cylinder displacement of an engine.
Thank you. Wow, that's great. Does anyone have a question or a thought related to this example? Or
Jennifer, do you have the rest of the slides from that PowerPoint, or is that the only two?
These are the only two that we've included in the presentation today, but my plan was to post the complete lesson on the SAS website. Was there something in particular you wanted to speak to? So I think I could probably pull it up.
Yeah, it's I think Lisa told me the other day she uploaded it to SAS for me, so it should be on the in the community section, and it should be in there. But we can easily add that yet if it didn't make it there. But it allowed us to just fill in information here with vocabulary, because I did the bore, the stroke. I actually had them reflect back to top dead center, bottom dead center, just to see if they remembered and get the kids into a group mode. But then it went on to doing an example. We did a 350 Chevy engine, and then did it the old way, or the way in the book. Did it with the volume of a cylinder, and we worked them down through. Actually, the next thing we did after this was I was talking about how the student asked me why he couldn't use the formula for a volume of a cylinder. So the next slide, actually, we reverse engineer that formula so they see it. And then we did an example, and then I did a think, pair, share. We did one example where the kids were in groups. The kid on the left had to use the old formula. Kid on the right, student on the right used the formula for a volume of a cylinder, and I wanted them to see if they got to the same answer.
You know, perhaps we could share that on our April webinar. We have some space in the program, so if I'll connect with you offline, Sam and Lisa, and it does seem like a great lesson, pulling in a lot of these elements. So we'll see if we can perhaps work that in for the April session, if that's okay.
Sure.
Great. Thank you for sharing.
It's fun.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, Kathleen, should I go to?
Yeah.
example?
Absolutely. The next one would be great. And I'm so excited to hear we're going to expand on that because that was a great effort on their part. So in this idea of kind of that visual approach to the literacy component of that, where they had the Sam and Lisa had that side-by-side opportunity, this is also another opportunity. There's just a couple quick ones. This one about, sometimes I see teachers use word walls, or they post some concepts, or they may have posters in the room that has certain things described. And I think there's an opportunity here in terms of a literacy strategy for, was it Mike? Mike saying about flow charting? It was really neat to hear that. That is exciting. And so this is kind of similar to that. But it's not looking at a process as much as it is like creating a word web that shows the relationship between some of the key vocabulary and terminology. So it's an opportunity to help bridge mathematics terminology with automotive terminology, but also to show the relationships between the two. So for example, on the screen, this idea of measurement and systems of measurement. And so thinking about what in the automotive world is measured. And then from there, you could add some aspects. Like somebody might be willing to type in to the chat box, Jennifer, like what might be something they could add to this? What could they ask students to add to this if they were going to create a word web of measurement? What else could they add? I'm curious if we have any ideas there.
Sure. Any thoughts or ideas as to how that could be expanded upon? Feel free to type it in or raise your hand. Not seeing anything quite yet. Let's see, perhaps something here.
That's okay. You want me to keep going?
Let's see, labor hours for an invoice with an example under time.
Terrific. Yeah. That's cool.
Strategy-based diagnosis is a common flow chart used in auto trade.
Okay, strategy diagnosis.
Gross income yearly. Some of the ideas coming in through the chat
box. Mm-hmm. Terrific, terrific. Yeah, I mean, and I was thinking too, like in the world of measurement, that example, you could add the tools. What tools are used? I mean, they could do students could web the whole use of certain measurement tools, and they could also include units and the idea of precision. If these things need to be measured to the thousands, like they should be able to call that up. And so this is a way to develop their procedural fluency around that whole world, but it's the idea of webbing. So thank you so much. And Jennifer, there's, I think, one more classic literacy strategy that I really like. This tool, I think, can be very complementary to the idea of some big math concepts that are found in automotive, like the classic one of volume that we were just talking about. The Freyer model is designed very simply. It's just a simple template, but it really forces students to get to the nitty-gritty of some of these concepts. So the idea of how it works is you would place your concept in the middle, and that could be kind of one of those loaded words that we started with, those math-rich words in automotive, like volume. And then students would have to work. They could work collaboratively to look at defining that. What are some characteristics of volume? So maybe they could state, how they find volume, and then some examples and non-examples, so they could get the fact that volume is around three-dimensional objects and not two-dimensional. So it allows them to sort of play around with the concept, and that's where we want to get to. We want to, and I know time is of the essence. I realize that with many, many, many conversations with talented CTE teachers say, Kathleen, we don't have a lot of time, and I realize that. I do think, though, that picking and choosing your battles and sort of looking for those opportunities to build understanding around the bigger concepts pay off in the long run, because then we don't have the idea of students saying you're students without understandings of fractions and students not doing well with conversions. If we can get them really set on those without those gaps, we're going to, in the long run, we're going to be better off. So I just wanted to put a plug out for that. Mm-hmm. And some of these tools I think are pretty efficient in terms of being useful. So in terms of working the literacy, I think that's what we had. Is that right, Jennifer?
I believe so. Yep.
Yeah. And, have we had any other comments or thoughts from folks before we move on to our second challenge area?
just take a short pause to see if there are any questions or thoughts, and then just to pose a question to you, Kathleen. I'm looking at the time. We're almost at 2:30, which means we have approximately a half hour left. Would you like to continue in the order of content that we have, or should we skip ahead?
Yes.
What?
No, I think it'd be great if we get through the 3 areas.
Okay.
So we've got the other 2 areas of the tools, and then I think we can leave the Common Core for next time, if that works, or
sure,
if you're okay with that.
That sounds great. Did you want to say anything about this example?
Oh, yeah, from Mr. Baird, is it? From Bobby in Franklin County. This is so neat. I love that this was sent in, so thank you for that, Bobby. And I just thought it was a really rich opportunity, and I was curious from a literacy standpoint. I was wondering if people took a minute to kind of read, just to look at it, just increasing engine performance and that piece from the automotive excellence that's on the left. And I'm curious if folks, how, from a literacy standpoint, could you potentially help students to tackle all that's being asked of them? Because there's a lot there, right? The function of a cam, what are some factors in making decisions about engine performance? I mean, it goes on and on. Forgive the dog. So I'm curious what you think, if there's some opportunity to, I'm gonna mute myself for a minute, but Jennifer, if you can ask folks like what they would do from a literacy perspective.
Sure. Any thoughts on that topic or ideas that you might have? This again, thank you, Bobby, for sharing this example. We felt like it really pulled together a lot of those ideas that we've been talking about, so we appreciate that. Okay. Well, what I just also wanted to mention, I'm not sure I said this when we started, but we will be posting this PowerPoint, the whole set of slides and the resources that we've shared with you today to the SAS site. So if there's something that you see here that you want to come back to, or some of the examples, those will certainly be available. So we have a question, where does this example come from? It looks like it comes from a textbook. I did type the questions up. I pulled them off of the original scan, but perhaps, Bobby, you could tell us where, what book, does this come from a book? Go ahead, please.
Yes, it does. It comes from Automotive Excellence textbook.
Automotive Excellence textbook, okay.
Yes, yes. And that's a Glencoe, I guess is the company that puts it out.
Okay, so Glencoe textbook. Great, thank you. Okay, thanks. Oh, go ahead.
Jennifer, this is Matt. I was just going to ask Bobby, and I don't know if this microphone is working well enough, but it looks like it would be interesting to know how he uses it. If students answer the questions all at one time, or if they fill in a chart, or it's kind of how he breaks it up a little bit. But if Kathleen's back, you could go on too, either way.
Sure. Let me see. Let's see. I'm trying to unmute Bobby, but that's not working at the moment. But that is a great question. So hopefully we can come back to him. Oh, go ahead, Bobby. Did you hear that question from my colleague?
Yeah. Something went funny on my screen here.
Sure.
Very welcomed me to the webinar. So, as far as basically going down through where it says the applied section situation, that's the part that as far as the writing assignment, I think is what the question is asking for. Writing assignment is dealing with the different situations. One of the things that from whether our math or our literacy, I think, is trying to figure out ways to make math and literacy applicable to the students. Like, why do I need to know this? And when we start talking about performance and changing performance in automobiles, that seems to turn a light switch on in a lot of students. And that's one of the reasons I use this a lot for
Right, right, okay. And I'm sorry to interrupt you. So again, a little bit hard to hear everything you were saying, but I caught that your students are asking, why do I need to know this? And this idea of bringing together math and literacy and writing all into to one place together, right? Okay. Great. Well, thanks again for sharing that. Appreciate that.
And Jennifer, if I could piggyback on that very quickly, I think one thing I'd like to leave for food for thought of our webinar folks is the idea of Einstein said. This came from really like a clip from TED Talks on Dan Meyer. He's a mathematics teacher, young mathematics teacher, who said that we don't provide students enough opportunity to help define the problem. And I think this is such an interesting problem. There's so much there in terms of the engine performance. And I think it'd be an interesting exercise to consider if you look at the piece that's from the book and say, okay, so what could I start them with? Like the question saying, do you give it to them a little bit at a time? Yes. Yes, you give them just enough and then have the students collectively and collaboratively decide, well, what are they going to have to know? Like, what can they determine from that? If they don't have rocker arm ratios, does that limit them in what they would be able to figure out, or how would they make their decisions? There's just such great stuff here that Bobby has presented. I think it would be interesting to think about how would you invite students to create and figure out the questions that they could answer, or what could they get after. And so I think part of it is the idea of developing the problem. Thank you.
Okay. So with that, I guess we'll go ahead and move on to our next segment, which is thinking through ways to help students visualize numbers and data, and looking at information in one context and translating it to another. Kathleen?
Yes, thank you, Kathleen and the dog. Forgive me so much.
I'm glad it's your dog and not mine.
I try to rein in the puppy. Forgive me, automotive world. You folks are so patient with this, and let me pose the question, and I'll get rid of the puppy. So on the screen, you see a rule of thumb. This is a template that I've been trying to promote in the TAP world in terms of called Rule of 4. And so the goal is to really invite students in the automotive, in their scenarios and in their studies, to translate information from different representations. Research in mathematics understanding suggests this is a very powerful thing to help students. And so looking for opportunities, for example, if students come across, they're reading a technical article and there's a graph of information, could they be challenged to take that and either translate it to a table or translate it to words, create a summary? And folks do that. The folks that are online, I'm sure, really have some great examples of that. And so it's called Rule of 4, and we're really challenging instructors right now to get out there and really experiment with how this works and get some neat examples so that we can cross-pollinate and share, look, my students took this symbolically and went to a graph. And when you see the top right of symbols, they're referring to the idea of, typically in mathematics, they're looking at algebraic symbols. So for example, they may be looking at a rate, and students would say, well, if x equals this, then y equals that. That's what they mean by symbolic, but it also means that students can be, challenged creatively to come up with symbols and represent information that way. So I think in the following slides, and we'll do this one quickly because I know time is of the essence, but there's some great, so there's oil viscosity, right, the collection, and so it would be neat to give folks a moment to study those and see if they would have an idea of how any of these samples could be switched in terms of or translated to another representation. And Jen, may I have you do that with the 2 slides, and then I'll get rid of puppy and come right back.
Sure. Sounds good. So some of these examples were shared with us by members of the PLC, and some of them I went out and had some fun searching around online. But I was looking for some different examples and representations. So do these trigger any thoughts or ideas for folks as to how you could potentially use something like this and challenge your students to think to take any of this information and translate it into a different format? One thought I had was just to compare the different charts and see, do they even match up? Certainly coming from different sources, the information might be slightly different, but to do a comparison of the data I thought could be an interesting exercise.
Jennifer, this is one of those real-world examples that what it reminds me of is what you see on a test, actually. Sometimes in a more standardized test where a student has to look graphically at several items and really pull some realistic answers out of that. But using this kind of example where it's related to what they're learning already, probably a good in-class discussion. It may help them in test taking later on. I don't know if anybody's had an experience with that or not.
Sure, that's a good point, Matt. Thank you for sharing that. Okay,
Jennifer, maybe the next one too. Oh, go ahead.
Sure.
Sorry.
That's what I was just going to say. So all kinds of information, and you probably have these in your textbooks and perhaps any manuals that you use. So we're just trying to get you to think about ways that you might be able to pull that together. Let's see. Had a comment for these to create word problems where you leave blanks and have students pull out words and numbers. For example, back on the oil, with the oil data, what is the range of oil temperatures? So having them, sounds like, study the information and answer questions related to the information that's presented. So even just the basic, how do you read a table or a graph or a chart? It's a good example. Thank you. Okay. I had one more set of examples, just talking about the auto industry. And some of these are just, they were really just fun and interesting to look at. Any other, does this trigger any other thoughts or ideas? Has anyone done this type of exercise with your students and would like to share? Not seeing any hands raised. Kathleen, is there anything additional that you wanted to add on this idea?
Thank you. No, thank you for that. Just that the slides that we've shown visual representations of data, and that the world is filled with that, and it's certainly not going away anytime soon. In fact, folks can make some, lovely six figures really managing visual representations of data. So data mining is a big, huge industry now, and there are data miners in the auto industry. And so I think it behooves us to think about, having data savvy students and giving them an opportunity. And so we looked at what we're looking at are the visual representations, but there's also, the idea of symbolic and stories, in the written form, and having them translate. The power of being able to take some dense data, or if students are running time tests on battery life or whatever, and then having them translate that graphically is very powerful, and absolutely is something that they're going to be assessed on as well. So I appreciate the opportunity to kind of plant the seed around multiple representations. And I think we have one more. Okay. Power area, right?
Or if I could just, I just wanted to share, there were two ideas that came in via the chat box.
Oh, great.
Or actually three, looks like. So Sam suggests that he collects tire stickers and has students use those charts to complete a worksheet, which is an interesting real-world example. Pete says you can talk about possible future outlooks and variables that could influence changes. And Lisa says, ask the students why this information is important to them. A great open-ended question.
Absolutely. Those are super thoughts, super suggestions. Thank you so much. And I think we have yes. So we have one more world to sort of, scratch at together and see what your contemplations are from the automotive talents online. the idea of problem-solving strategies. And these are very classic, and yet it's interesting that as the role of the instructor, I think it behooves us to think about how do we encourage students to have a repertoire of strategies on how to start solving problems. We're moving to address the Common Core State Standards for mathematics. We have to think about rich problems, meaning rich, deep, complex, etc. And so when students have gaps in basics of fractions and conversions, it can be very overwhelming. And I think also Kathy had mentioned the idea of math phobia, and she's absolutely right. That's like a true phenomenon. They've studied it. And the idea of students really sort of suggesting, well, I'm not a math person, I don't think like that. So we have an opportunity in the automotive world, in all these neat scenarios and problems, to encourage students to practice the idea of problem-solving strategies. And so these are just a list of some of the most classic ones that help them to start a problem. It's sort of like, well, I don't know what to do. And so here they are. And we'll go into each of them very quickly, and I'd love to hear some ideas of how they might be useful in the world of automotive. So guess and check, and I have one for each slide. Yep. Drawing a picture, making a model, very, very important in the automotive world. Looking for patterns. Yep, lists and charts that we just saw. Working backwards. Okay, so the goal for us as a collective community is, and it's the next bullet I think, is the idea of how can we work these strategies into our projects and assignments and expectations. But sometimes they take the instructor modeling these to show, well, how would you do this? And so I think it's a great opportunity when teachers are willing to say, well, boy, this is kind of messy. I'm not sure where to start. Here's where I might start, and show them how that might work, and then down the road give them an opportunity. So each of these on the next slides, Jennifer, are described, and then we can see, I'd love to open it up and see from the automotive talents what their ideas are. So guess and check works sort of like exactly as it sounds. Yeah, so it's where students have an opportunity to guess an answer and then check it and see if it fits the condition of the problem, and see if from their guess and check what they learn from it if it's not the right answer. So this is not necessarily an automotive, these are not necessarily automotive examples, but I wanted to get them where they were pretty clear about what they look like. So I'll let you read the example. Yeah, so the idea is with the guess and check process is that students would read that and say, well, I'm not sure, but let me check. So let's see, if the Mighty Brains tied 3 and won 2 more than they lost, how many did they win? So they're trying to figure out, what do I need to know? And then they'll start setting it up, like if they tied 5 rounds, how many did they win and how many did they lose? And so they have to start thinking about it, and they can actually make guesses and check and see if it works. If it adds up to 25, and then it would say, okay, this is helping me, or I'm not going in the right direction. So I'm curious from, the goal here is to think about how guess and check might be useful in the automotive world in a scenario that students have to kind of keep track of what they're learning as they're testing. They're testing a scenario, like, did that work? What did I learn from that? And I'm curious if anybody, by a show of hands or in the chat box, has some ideas. Jennifer, do you want me to keep going, or do you want to see if we have some feedback?
I think in the interest of time, Kathleen, if it's okay, we'll keep going, and if folks have ideas as we go, perhaps they can raise their hands.
Okay, sounds good. So we'll just keep going, but yeah, we'd love to hear some ideas. So the next one is on the next slide is drawing a picture, making a model, and that one I think makes a lot of sense for the world of automotive, and so I was trying to capture this idea of the surface area of a piston, and that's a cylinder, and so students, if they're given that problem in writing, that they could be encouraged to go, well, I know exactly what I'm going to do. They're going to draw a picture of a cylinder, and they're going to label it, and that's going to help them understand the idea of surface area. Because those things, geometric principles, are so much more tolerable when there's a visual. Thank you. So that's another one. We have the next one, looking for a pattern, and so I think there's an example coming up. Yep. So we'll let folks read that one.
I hope I didn't reveal the answer too quickly. Just click through.
No, that's fine. So it's just to give, and folks can reference this PowerPoint, right? We'll be
Yes.
uploading this. But this idea of looking for a pattern is that in the automotive world, there might be things that behave in patterns, like they grow at certain consistent rates. You might have that phenomenon, and so it would be neat for students to have to kind of press them to say, you know, what does that tell you? Like, start tracking that rate and seeing what trend does it give you. Whereas this one, it's saying that the same rate, the group grew at a similar rate, and so they grew, you could figure it out, they grow 9 automotive dealers each day, and so how many days does it take, and it would figure out to get to 100, and you could figure out that would be 12 days for every day they add 9. So that's the idea of looking for a pattern. The next one is, yeah, making a list or a chart, and it was just an example like we saw all those different charts and lists. That's a phenomenal thing to ask students to do. I was excited when Don Bray from Western out in the East, he had students, they did an article about battery life, and, he was testing something. It was fascinating. He said he had never asked his students to generate or to capture the data when they were running these tests, and he did it, and students thought it was interesting from a long-term perspective. So sometimes it's a matter of graphing it, sometimes it's a matter of creating a chart. It's a way to make sense of the information. So that's a great problem-solving strategy that applies to automotive. And then lastly, I think we have another one. Yes, working backwards. So I think there's So this is one of those classic problems, but let them read it. Yeah. So the question becomes like, what time did the guy leave the original site? And then you have all this information in between, and so this is a classic opportunity to work backwards. So students would say, okay, if he arrived at 2:45, you start at the 2:45 time, and you start subtracting the time that he had to go from this and this to kind of work backwards to the point of when he left his original position. So that's not automotive, but I'd love it if we could come up with some great opportunities. We want to look across the network and say, are there opportunities that we can encourage students to practice these types of problem-solving strategies so that when they get stuck out there in reality, their minds can go, well, maybe I should, make a chart, or maybe I could try to look for a pattern. That's where we're going with this. So, Jennifer, did you notice if anybody came in with a suggestion on any of those examples, any of those techniques?
I don't see anything yet, but we'll encourage everyone to do so. I did have a question, though. We heard from a couple participants about, students sometimes not even having an idea what the ballpark answer should be. Would any of these strategies help with that? Or maybe like an estimating, or just helping students even get a sense of what, should it be closer to 100 or 1 million?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think guess and check is a really, kind of a solid way for them to say, does that make sense? And sort of looking at where they're going. Yeah, and that's a phenomenon that's really important for students to have a sense of reality to their answer. Like how, does that make sense? That's a great question to have them wrestle with. And so I think all of these are an opportunity, but there are different ones that work in different situations. So I wanted to kind of give the group a taste of these and see where they would work, where they would go from here. And what automotive situations would lend themselves to, whether it's guess or check or look for a pattern or working backwards, etc. So I think that's where we are. We'd love some input there. And then I think, Jennifer, if you're okay, we can look at the Common Core math practices for our next gathering. Would that?
I think that sounds fantastic. I think that would definitely be great. So had one comment come in from Sam. He says, work backwards. An example with that is billing and customer service, cost and saving money. Sam, I'd like to try to unmute your microphone, see if you could expand on that a little bit.
It's a great idea.
Could you go ahead and describe that a little bit more for us, please?
Yeah, my quick initial thought was, I just put myself back in the days when I did work where, you put an estimate together for a customer and you call them up and you talk to them about the repair, and the bill might be like $600 and some, and they might say, look, I got $500 and that's it. So maybe you would go back into the bill and and wonder if it was stuff that you needed, stuff you suggested. And I think a lot of us and the trade and the teachers, we all use like car report cards, whether stuff needs it now, whether it's recommended, and it would force a student to have to look back across a bill or an estimate they made in class for a customer.
That's a great example, and bringing in sort of the business skills side of things as well. And I wonder if you could even incorporate writing and having them, potentially write a letter to the customer or something. Not that we would necessarily, or maybe an email would probably be more appropriate.
Yeah, definitely there would be some technique of communicating that information. Yep, you could do a summary or something like that.
Great. Thank you.
That's terrific. Sam is on fire. all these folks are they really have some great ideas. So, and I want to just encourage, and I'll turn it to Jennifer to see if there's any other thoughts, but these problem-solving strategies may not feel directly mathematical, but they're so important in terms of, because math also includes the idea of thinking and troubleshooting and diagnostics, and that's the world of automotive, to have students really be kind of efficient about diagnosing things, and because time is money and that whole thing. And so I'd love to pull from the talents online of like how we can find some great examples to show students these are techniques that can help you get some clarity around problems and diagnoses and investigating and troubleshooting. So that's why we included them in this idea of this toolbox for math understanding. So we have the multiple representations, we have these problem-solving strategies, and we have the use of literacy. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out as that's where we were going with this. And Jennifer, if there's any last thoughts from the folks, and I'll turn it over to you, and if she wanted to share resources or however you wanted to. And thank you for the opportunity to be part of it today.
Great. Thank you. Are there any other additional thoughts or questions from our PLC members? Okay, well, I'll go ahead and just jump forward with a couple wrap-up items, and if something comes to mind, please feel free to share that. Let's see. So I'm going to skip over. There's some additional content that we'll queue up for our April webinars, since I'm really happy and excited that we had such a great discussion today. So that's fantastic. Just give you a quick look at a couple resources. These are two websites that Kathleen has recommended, and do you wish to say anything about these, Kathleen? I didn't really get a chance to look at them other than putting them on our slide here.
No, just that they are definitely mathy. And that may not sit well with everybody, but I think that especially illustrative mathematics, and both of them have examples, which I think is helpful at times. So as folks are navigating the Common Core and saying, well, I'm not sure geometrically if I do that, it's just another place to go. And I think they're very they're connected to the authors of the Common Core state standards, so the things on there, you can't go wrong in terms of knowing if they align with the Pennsylvania Core. So I just wanted to encourage that there's some websites that are developing out there that have some things for us. So if they have a few minutes and want to poke around and look at example, one of them has problems of the problems of the week, that kind of thing. So just wanted to kind of expand our horizons on what's out there. Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll be sure to add these to our listings as well. Just a reminder that we do have these resources that we're collecting and building on the SAS community site, and we'll be sure to add those websites. And if you have websites that you access and would like to share, please feel free to send those links to us via email, and we'll be happy to add those as well. Okay, so just a couple quick notes on next steps. Our final webinar for this year will be in April, specifically on April 24th from 9:30 to 11. And we've left it sort of an open program, a wrap-up and reporting out. So what we'll plan to do is include some additional content from today's session that we didn't get to, as well as any lessons that sample lessons or other information that parts or members of our PLC would like to share. And we also, if you recall, had asked for feedback on other topics that are of interest, and we have that information and are working on lining up some speakers to come and answer some questions that you have about other related topics. So if there's anything else that's sort of pressing and something that you're really wanting to get more information about, whether it is related to math, sample lessons, or any other topic that you think would be of interest to your colleagues, just send us a note and we'll do our best to get someone to come and talk about that. And just a reminder that if you are planning to pursue Act 48 credits, we ask that you complete and submit a webinar response form to us by Monday of next week. And those forms are available on the SAS community site. If you can't find that, just send us a note or give us a call and we can send it to you via email. So just take a quick check to see if are there any last questions or comments. We've had a great discussion today and lots of good ideas shared. So I thank you all for joining us and participating. It's been really an interesting program. So we're happy to have been able to put that together. Okay, I don't see anyone's hands raised, so I'd like to thank Kathleen McNally from SREB for joining us today and putting together the content and the examples that we looked at. Also thank our PLC members for sharing your examples and ideas and experiences. We'll look forward to meeting with you one more time in April. Thanks everyone. Have a great afternoon.